website later. So please know that it's being recorded. So welcome to you all. A very warm welcome to our panelists. Two of the panelists are here right now. We're waiting on a third, hopefully, who will join us as we go on. Welcome all friends and donors of MEG board members, selection committee members, and other volunteers. My name is Vesna. So I want to especially welcome all MEG grantees who are here today. If you are a grantee working in literacy and education, or you have an interest in this area and would like to network with other grantees in the field, I would like to invite you to go to the chat, to identify yourself in the chat and leave us a way to connect with you, your LinkedIn or your email address, so that other grantees can connect with you too. Because MEG Talks, they're not only a wonderful way for us to showcase the incredible work that our grantees do, they're also very good networking opportunities, which can lead to very fruitful collaborations. So let me start by introducing our panelists. So I'll do that in the order of the year of their grant. So first, Denise Zinn. So Dr. Zinn, Denise received the MEG grant in 1996. Denise, if you could just show, there you go. She is a former Deputy Vice Chancellor for Learning and Teaching at Nelson Mandela University. Denise has worked in teacher education and served as Dean of Education at university level in South Africa. She currently leads the Women in Leadership program for Universities South Africa, which is the umbrella organization that represents South Africa's 26 public universities. So welcome, Denise, and thank you for being here with us today. Next, I would like to introduce Anna Molosiwa. Anna is not with us right now, but I will introduce her once she is able to log on. We will see her. So Dr. Molosiwa Anna, she received the grant in 2006. She has recently retired from her position as an Associate Professor of Language and Literacy Education at the University of Botswana. Her work focuses on language and literacy education, support of local languages, and educational participation of children in underserved rural and remote areas. She is a member of the nonprofit Botswana Dyslexia and Social Support Services, which is dedicated to empowering individuals with dyslexia. Last but certainly not least, we have Rachat Joldosha Lieva, who received the MEG grant in 2012. Rachat is the team leader of the Quality Learning Ecosystems program at the UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning in Hamburg, Germany. Rachat specializes in education policy and planning, teacher training, curriculum design, rural education, and adult learning. Welcome, Rachat. So as you can see, we have three fantastic grantees with us here today, and thank you all very much. Our moderator today is Priscilla Lynn. Priscilla is a member of the MEG board. Priscilla, if you can show yourself also. There you go. She's a past president of the board and the brain behind the idea for these MEG talks. Priscilla holds a doctorate in social anthropology and has pursued educational strategies throughout her 40-year career. So it is my pleasure to hand you over to Priscilla to get our session started. Thank you, Priscilla. You're on mute, Priscilla.
I'm not on my computer, so I would like to invite Denise to begin her presentation. We're all looking forward to it. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And a warm welcome to everyone who is listening in. And I'm going to ask Jet if she would put up my presentation. I've got a PowerPoint slide, which I'll kind of run through quite quickly, just to give the overview. So I'll just wait for Jet to get that up. And to put it into presentation mode, it's up. Do you want me to start? Jet, can you put it into, there you go. Okay, great. So I've entitled my talk, Developing Literacy in South Africa, Issues, Interventions, and No Easy Solutions. Priscilla and Meg emphasized that we really need to focus on solutions, but there aren't any easy ones. So I'm going to just do a quick flash through why it's so difficult to find easy solutions. And I'm going to start by just giving you a quick outline, the next slide. So 3 things. I'm only going to focus on 3 things. One, the contextual realities and what I'm calling some startling stats as it relates to literacy in South Africa. I want to say just a few words on political will, and then maybe focus on what to do, because solutions are being asked for. And let's see how far we get with that. On to the next slide. So some contextual realities. I think many of you know this, but in South Africa, a large part of our population lives in poverty, despite we are 30 years post 1994 with democracy, but still about 13.6% of our population live in these conditions. As you see in this picture, that would be about 3 million people. These are shanties. They have no electricity, no running water, no toilet facilities, and so on. On to the next slide. So the poverty indicators are quite stark. Approximately 55.5%, that is about 30.3 million people of our population live in poverty. At the national upper poverty line, that is about 992 South African rands, which is about, I would say, about $10. While a total of about 13.5 million people, that's 25% of our population, are experiencing food poverty. On to the next slide. We live in conditions, and schools are in conditions where they're still made out of mud. This is an example of some schools in the Eastern Cape. And all of this, I think, forms a backdrop to what we are challenged by in terms of literacy and literacy development in our country. The next slide. So in South Africa, out of these 10 silhouettes of children, only 2 will be able to read for meaning when they are 10 years old. And the question, of course, is what will happen to the other 8? Next slide. The progress in international reading and literacy study, which abbreviated to the Pearl study, in the 2020-2021 study, out of 57 countries who participated, South Africa came in 57th place, last, which is quite shocking. A panel of leaders, researchers, experts formed right after the study's results came out. They formed what was called the 2030 Reading Panel to monitor progress towards the goal of ensuring that children aged 10 and older could read for meaning by 2030. However, this panel itself states nothing short of a sustained countrywide overhaul of the education system would be likely to yield this result. So, on to the next slide. What this does require, of course, is then for us to really think about some of those conditions that are contributing to the state. One other big contextual reality is the fact that unemployment, especially amongst youth, is very, very high. So there is an acronym called NEETs, which stands for young people who are not in employment, education, or training in South Africa. And this figure is alarmingly high. So this NEET rate stands currently at about 30.6%. This is the 2021 figure. It's grown even higher in 2024. This is a trend that's persisted for over a decade. And when one looks at unemployment rates among young individuals, that's between 15 and 34 years of age, it stood at 45% in the first quarter of 2024. People between the ages of 15 to 34, 45% of them are not employed. So this speaks to the issue of economy, political economy, social economy. And this issue disproportionately affects women, with 47% of them being in this category called NEETs, compared to 39.9 or 40% of men. So this brings us to the issue of political will, which is kind of the second focus that I'd like to just name very briefly. The next slide, please, Jet. So what do we mean when we talk about political will? We're referring to the commitment and the determination of the political leaders and governments to achieve specific policy reforms or objectives. And this often in the face of challenges, opposition, controversy. It involves a strong and sustained effort to overcome obstacles, to resist pressure from special interest groups, and to make difficult decisions to bring about positive change. In South Africa, I would contend this is sorely lacking. The 2030 reading panel comments, there is no national reading plan. The most recent national reading strategy was published in 2008. That is 16 years ago. And not much has been done to actually put it into effect under current conditions. So while there is recognition of the crisis, and many provincial governments, our country is divided into 9 provinces, each with its own provincial government, they've indicated they will address this. But one example in the Eastern Cape, where I worked for over 40 years, it launched a reading strategy and campaign, 2022 to 2030. This is following on the Pearl study, but it has provided no budget for these programs. So this speaks to the issue of political will. And an example of political will in relation to literacy, for me, the biggest, greatest example is the literacy campaign in Cuba. And I just briefly want to mention that in the next slide, just to have a look at what they did there. So in Cuba's literacy campaign in 1961, after the revolution in 59, one of the first things that the government there did was to actually address what was the very, very low literacy rates. And the Cuban Ministry of Education, their goal was to reach over 700,000 illiterate Cubans. Now, obviously, Cuba is a much smaller country. Fewer people, the distance was fewer, but the strategy is what is very interesting. So when I think about solutions, I think about this kind of mobilization that involves students, teachers, and community members. So the principles and the strategy in this campaign was this mass mobilization of teachers, students, community members, and they were known as brigadistas. The decentralization of the campaign, where teaching took place everywhere and anywhere, in local communities, in schools, in rural areas, everywhere. It was a participatory approach. The campaign encouraged community participation and involvement, and the local residents took on an active role in teaching and learning. The emphasis was on social change, and of course, the outcome was a remarkable success by UNESCO. It was regarded by UNESCO's own reporters as one of the most, if not the most successful literacy campaign in the world. So, having emphasized this issue of political will, I go on to what to do. The next slide, please. And I think it isn't really rocket science what it is one has to do. The number of interventions, the number of ways in which people address these kinds of problems is well known. And here are five practices that is recommended by one of the experts in this area of literacy and emerging literacy. She is a lecturer at the University of the Western Cape, and she talks about living libraries, making sure that in every foundation phase, our schooling is divided into 3 phases, with grade R or grade K to grade 3 being regarded as the foundation phase. And it's about providing really interesting quality handmade, published and non-fiction story books to the class. It requires that dedicated time is spent every day for teachers to read aloud and talk about interesting books. It requires that there's dedicated time for shared writing, writing with purpose. We tend to focus on handwriting exercises when we talk about writing in South Africa. Developing basic skills and understanding of text structures and genres, how stories start, begin, develop and end, common genres for that particular age group, like recipes and so on. And then also, very importantly, providing ongoing training for pre-service and in-service teachers, including having literacy coaches. And all of these have been put in place in programs. So to the next slide. So several interventions and programs are currently taking place in South Africa, but they are fragmented. And research that has looked at this particular area shows that they have not all been monitored to show the impact. And the results are variable and certainly is not making a national impact. Some examples of these programs, whom I have to acknowledge, they are doing fantastic work. To the next slide, and we're going to go through the next set of slides really quickly. They're just examples of organizations, NGOs doing this work. One is WordWorks, that has now got a huge reach. The Nelson Mandela, we can go on to the next one, the Nelson Mandela Institute for Education and Rural Development, developing Magic Classroom Collective, where they're using, very interestingly, a bilingual approach, a mother tongue-based bilingual approach, and showing remarkable results, but still the reach is limited. Community-based programs on the next slide. Several, too many to mention, but the idea being that communities surrounding schools play a vital role in the learner's achievement in school, with the assumption that community members are assets and that they can play a role in turning schools into centers of learning that embrace not only learners, but also educators and also the wider community. And there are several examples of these, some initiated by universities in particular areas, such as the Project for the Study of Alternative Education in South Africa, called PLACER, the Center for the Community School at Nelson Mandela University, where I was at, and then lots of collaborations and NGOs. One example, Trevor Noah Foundation with Nali Bali, which was an offshoot of PLACER, Read to Rise Literacy, Room to Read Africa, Shine Literacy, and many, many more. But we come to the crux of the matter. The next slide, which is, I think, also the last slide. Most important, the solution lies in political will. There needs to be strong political leadership with a focused plan, and that is for a national intervention with dedicated budgets. And the substance of these programs need to be contextualized. They need to be interesting, meaningful, and in multiple languages in our country. They need to use humanizing pedagogies, such as those advocated and philosophized by Paulo Freire. There need to be annual universal assessments for monitoring the progress, for planning interventions, and for fostering accountability. We need to be reskilling teachers, but also community members with practical and pedagogical knowledge. And there needs to be access to a set of appropriate quality learning, teaching, and support materials. And that's it by way of an overview. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. fascinating and heartening, and also very perplexing. You have to wonder why there is no political will to address this important issue, and maybe we can talk about that later. I guess Hannah is not connected, or is Hannah, is she connected? I see her name, but I don't hear her.
I don't see her.
And then we can move on to Hakat. I'm sure we'll have some very interesting points to make. Thank you. Oh, there's her.
Anna's waving.
Yeah, Hannah, are you there? I'm afraid we can't hear you.
Maybe.
I guess I will continue.
Yes, let's continue. One thing you could do, Hannah, is type some of your basic ideas into the chat, and we would be able to see. I'm assuming if you can type it into the chat, we would be able to see it. And that would be at least one way we could get some of your more basic points for this discussion. I'm truly amazed at our technology not being able to work, but we are including you very much in our thoughts here. I'd like to move on to Hakat and her pursuit of lifelong education. Thank you.
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you for this invitation to speak to the MEG community here. And I'm so pleased to join you all, and very happy to be sharing this panel together with Denise and Anna, and to think about how to make education and literacy accessible to all. I will be actually speaking mostly with the focus on youth and adult literacy. This is what I'm currently doing since I joined the UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning. And maybe I'll start from the very basics and complement some of the arguments Denise has already made through in her presentation. As we all know, education is one of the fundamental human rights enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. As such, many countries include this right in their constitutions. And literacy is oftentimes assumed to be an integral part of this of the right to education and the foundation for lifelong learning. And education enjoys still the position, an important position within the global development goals and agendas. And within the framework of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, there is a special goal dedicated to education, which states to ensure inclusive, equitable, quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. The difference between the previous EFA goal on education and SDG goal on education, in this goal, there is a specific mention of lifelong learning for the first time in the articulation of this. And here I will actually talk a little bit about what do we mean by lifelong learning as well. So although education is critical in the achievement of all SDG goals, including 16 of them, I mean, in addition to education goal, we believe, as it is believed, that it equips and develops skills and knowledge and values necessary to achieve other sustainable goals. It is still, unfortunately, not fully realized its potential. And next week, on 31st of October, 1st of November, the governments are gathering in Fortaleza in Brazil in the Global Education Meeting 2024, where UNESCO is organizing in collaboration with the government of Brazil a special meeting of the some of the heads of the government, as well as the ministers of education, other relevant ministers, to reflect on the progress of SDG targets globally, regionally, and nationally. And one of these sessions will be dedicated to the issue of youth and adult literacy in particular. Unfortunately, as I said, the SDG Goal 4 is one of the 17 SDGs, which the progress of which is severely off track. So The issue here is related to quality and equity, and in some cases, the educational development actually, when it comes to equity and quality, is remaining as a big problem to solve. In some cases, issue of equity has actually even deepened. The gap is actually increasing. And when we come to the issue of literacy in specific, I would like to highlight that in the SDG 4 targets, there are special references to the children's reading, writing, numeracy, etc. But when it comes to adult and youth literacy, it is SDG target 4.6 clearly states that by 2030, the government, all the countries, everybody has to ensure that all youth and a substantial proportion of adults, both men as well as women, achieve literacy and numeracy. And I think Denise has highlighted to some extent the definition or some kind of understanding or conceptions of literacy. Maybe I can also re-emphasize some of them here. Defining literacy is a challenging task. It's not an easy way to define what literacy means, what literate person is in the current era when we are actually looking at the era of digital technologies as well. Oftentimes we use literacy definition more from a conventional way, from a conventional sense, when it is understood as a discrete set of cognitive skills involving the ability to decode, make a meaning with the print and communicate in writing. Yeah? And it often means simply the ability to learn how to read the mother tongue or other languages, national languages, using some kind of writing systems. Yeah, and then when we come from this conventional sense of literacy, it also means that there is a systematic way of teaching reading, writing, and literacy as well. And however, literacy is also understood in a more broader sense when the ability to read and write is not just cognitive skills, but also it is in relation to a set of social practices, focusing more on the use of literacy and specifically in everyday life. I think I hear echo. Sorry, and growing understanding, there is a growing understanding that literacy is a continuum of proficiency levels. So there are early literacy, or more advanced literacies as well. And from that perspective, we need to start looking and questioning some of the literacy statistics, which we read oftentimes on the papers as well. The more advanced, the literacy is a more complex skill set, and there's a continual proficiency level is also impacts our understanding about the need to improve literacy on a continuous basis throughout one's life. Yeah, and it is the important skill or important ability for us as human beings to adapt and contribute to this change that are happening whether in society and communities at large, and our contribution and participation in the labor markets, and our contribution to democracy, but also civic participation as well. When it comes to adult literacy in particular, I would like to emphasize on women literacy, because the issue of gender remains as a big issue in the world in terms of achieving women literacy at par with the men literacy for men. And unfortunately, I would like to highlight, even though statistics may actually give us a not very clear picture, more detailed or deeper understanding of literacy issues or challenges that we face currently, still the literacy rates, according to the latest statistics from the UNESCO Institute for Statistics, we know that 754 million youth and adults who are above the age of 15 are still not proficient, or they don't have basic literacy skills. And 2/3 of these, 754 million, are women. And today, 4 in 10 students do not meet proficiency levels in reading by the end of primary education. So even though some children are going to school, and they may be categorized later on as literate, they still have a issue when it comes to actual ability to read at the level which is expected by the standard curriculum standards of the countries. And we also have another issue. We have close to 250 million children who are out of school, and they are not in school, hence the literacy abilities are still not developed. Although we want to highlight that 87% of global population above the age of 15 can read and write now. It's a progress if we compare to the early years, to the 1990s, for example. However, this progress also doesn't give us more information around where the adults and youth are in relation to the regions and countries, because we have actually the inequity when it comes to illiteracy or literacy, low literacy in the countries. We have a regional issue when it comes to literacy. I want to highlight that countries in Africa, unfortunately, has the lowest literacy rates. Some of them are often, some of them may be due to the conflicts and the wars as well, and the global, the population growth too. The benefits of literacy are many. I think we don't have to highlight here a lot. We have seen very good example during COVID-19 pandemic, when the information on preventing and understanding the symptoms and getting treatment, or just understanding about this pandemic or the COVID-19 itself was communicated oftentimes through leaflets. So you had to have literacy skills to understand what has been communicated to you. And there were a lot of use of technology, such as text messages. We were getting a lot of information through our SMSs as well, and social media too. And when we have higher literacy levels, we are also able to deal with the misconceptions and disinformation that was around COVID as well. So I would like to highlight a couple of things. I do agree with Denise when she said the high political will. Unfortunately, political will remains quite low when it comes to literacy for youth and adults. There is a emphasis in the countries, when national governments, when it comes to literacy level, or reading and writing and numeracy, or arithmetics, when it comes to mathematics, when it comes to children. However, political will for youth and adult literacy remain quite low, unfortunately, whether it is on the global agenda or national educational agendas as well. Although everyone knows that literacy has their higher social benefits and also economic returns too. Literacy remains as an issue for older adults in particular, because we see progress in the literacy among youth, because there is an expansion of formal education. The adults who are between the age of 45 and above are those who actually remain one of the set of groups which do not necessarily get due attention from the policymakers, but also from the providers of the programs. Lower literacy levels and rates are also related to the language in education. Policies, particularly minority language speakers, are the ones who do not necessarily get education in their mother tongues, with impact on their literacy development too. I want to highlight also some of the cases of some of the unfortunate cases that are happening in the world. Literacy among women, girls and women, in the conflict and post-conflict context remains still as an issue. There is a deepening issue in this case, and as you know very well, for example, in Afghanistan, girls after their primary education and women are not really availing this opportunity and right to participate in educational programs and literacy programs as well. And solution, of course, there are many. A lot of solutions have already been tested in the past, so we don't have to recreate new ones. However, I think that some of the solutions are also related to the tools that are emerging, technologies that are emerging, and research base that is that's actually enriching day by day as well. And of course, there is a great opportunity for us to develop partnerships through private sector and other line ministries as well to contribute to literacy. And Denise also highlighted one important thing is actually using a lot of spaces, community spaces, to enrich the literate environment too. Those are the solutions which we have to talk, because there are a lot of local solutions that are happening. There's a need to document as well and enrich our understanding and also tools in improving literacy for all. I would like to stop here because I will continue on this because it's a topic of my work. And yeah, I would be happy to have questions and answer and discuss with you more lengthy, in a lengthy way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very comprehensive and informative. We do have a message from Anna. Unfortunately, she can hear us, but we cannot hear her. And one of the comments that she makes is that teaching, it's in the chat if you want to look at it, teaching pedagogies do not address the learning styles of many children. And one size fits all methods don't necessarily work for every child. And there's no diagnosis as to why some children can read at upper primary school levels, and parental involvement in the education of the children. And I can attest to this because my 12-year-old grandson cannot read very well. He's autistic, and the learning trajectory for him has been very difficult. So I certainly can sympathize with this comment. We'd like to open the questions, and Anna said she might be able to send us a video, which would be great, and Jette would be able to play it. But for the time being, I think we should open the questions, and I would like to ask the first question, and I would like Hakat and Denise to discuss this with each other, and because I think that this is the way we'll come to the most interesting approach to this. My first question is, what are the most significant ways the lack of education has been on overall economic development? And Denise, would you like to address that?
Yes, sure. I'm sorry. I'm struggling too this time with getting my getting my video on, but you can hear me, can you?
Yes, perfectly. Yes.
Yes. Okay. So I've been pressing the start video button and nothing happens. But I did hear your question, which was around some of the implications or some of the impact this has on the. Sorry, could you on the
economic development, the lack of education, what impact has it had on overall economic development?
On economic development. Yeah, so one of the most important areas it links to, of course, the rising unemployment and the rising gap between rich and poor. So South Africa at the moment, and I think this is probably true for most or many of the countries where this literacy issue prevents access to further education and prevents understanding and engaging with whatever is accessible via literacy, via reading and comprehending. The rising levels of unemployment, I mentioned this in my talk, especially amongst this age group that is under 35, is alarming. The 2024 figures show that 45% of young people between the ages of 15 and 34, 35, which is kind of towards post-schooling beyond primary school and high school, are unemployed. And this is, of course, going to have an additional consequence, does already have an additional consequence of political unrest, with things being like powder kegs, any issue. There is an army of young people who are ready to protest at anything that increases the discomfort, the discontent, the lack of sense of belonging or of any kind of access to a decent life. So I would say those are probably some of the most important, even though I think Anna and Richard probably have more that they can add.
Yes, Hakat, would you like to further the comments here?
Yeah, I do agree that lack of education actually has a high cost, economic cost, when it comes to individual, household, community, and national economic growth. Because higher the educational levels and the literacy levels, I think there is a positive impact on the earnings of the individuals and their households income, and the total population of educated individuals of the country, of course, contributes to innovations, to not just at the national level, but also at the global level. I think that is very connected. However, I think we need to also discuss about, I think Denise has highlighted an important issue here, that in the past there were very much causal relationship being discussed or presented, that with the particularly with the primary education level was positively related to the increase in their earnings. With the expansion of education, particularly primary education and secondary education, these days, I think we need to start thinking around which level of education we are talking about. Is it like secondary education? Is it higher education? Or are we talking about abilities, skills that I connect or that can adapt and to the technological development when it comes to the current era or current times, no? And I think it's not enough now to have to use the very conventional definition of literacy and education. It's often now we are actually emphasizing on the capabilities and the abilities of the individuals, but also learners in their ability to contribute to the economy, but also to feel more empowered and to who actually feel also in control of their lives. I think that is an important issue we have to discuss. In the 90s, maybe we could have discussed about this positive relationship between educational participation at the primary level and the literacy in the basic literacy programs. But today, I think that will not be sufficient. So we have to have a different kind of story now to discourse to develop, I guess.
Thank you. I see we have a hand up from our viewers, and I promise I'll get to you when we open the floor to the entire group. We're focusing on a few questions we've selected right now, and hopefully when we'll finish this in just a few minutes, and then we'll be able to open up the question and answers to everyone who's here. I have another question, which is, what incentives can families receive to educate their children? Denise, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, this is quite a difficult one, because I think I'm mostly speaking from the perspective of the country I'm in, because the local context is what influences my thinking about these issues. And I think that global responses and some of the things that happen on global scales around incentives are not necessarily pertinent everywhere. So things like voucher systems, things like providing social grants, things like providing clothing and food, because these are such basic needs in a country where such a large proportion are living in poverty, that I think a contextualized response in every situation is what's needed. And in a context like South Africa, some of the things that have been incentives have been empowering communities through schools to actually improve their own education. So, a little bit like what Richard is talking about, the how does one engage in lifelong learning type incentives? So one example is in a center that we started in the faculty I was in, called the Center for the Community School. those schools that adopted this particular model were able to offer programs at their schools, like becoming electricians, becoming plumbers, getting digitally literate, providing them with skill sets that enable them to enter into the job market, or to start their own employment little companies, do some entrepreneurial work. Those were actually bigger incentives than handouts. Our government also uses the incentives of food parcels and very, very small social grants. You know, it's sort of, I'm hesitant to use negative terminology, but it kind of keeps people entrapped really in a cycle of wanting handouts from the government rather than empowering themselves. So incentives for me would be along the lines of what Richard is recommending, which is lifelong learning opportunities so that they can improve their access to the kinds of things that the world is requiring of them.
Thank you. Hakat, would you like to continue on this thought?
Yeah, I think I do agree with Denise on several points here. One issue is that, yes, we do have to continue some of the programs that we have in the world, such as cash transfers, school meals, and many other programs that have been working and showing some good results. No, at the same time, I think engaging families and, as Denise said, communities as well in the process of schooling and education of the children is critical. Because I think there is an important element here, community ownership and family engagement. As the programs such as family literacy programs, family education programs have actually shown very good results, not just in the academic achievement of the children per se, particularly for the low income, low social class communities and households, but I think it's also through that process developing their abilities to and creating awareness, but also take control and own some of the processes of the education, whether they're children or of the community members. I think family literacy programs remain one of the interesting innovative approaches. Another one is also engaging, creating a lot of opportunities, as Denise said, creating literacy programs in many different spaces. I mean, in the more in the countries where they are receiving a lot of refugee and migrant populations or groups, there should be more opportunities for them to engage in the learning opportunities beyond just academic qualifications and vocational training. Engage in this community inclusion, social inclusion of these groups into the host societies. When it comes to countries where the education opportunities are limited for parents, it's also important for us to think about the opportunity cost for such adults to participate in educational programs. Oftentimes, in many parts of the world, participating in continuing professional development, etc., remains at the cost of the individuals and the households, and it's quite high. And I think specialized programs for families and parents are very important, I think, to develop, which go by, hand in hand with the education of children. That's why I think we wouldn't document or talk about resistance of the communities. Another component which I would like to really highlight here, I think Anna has written to some extent here in the chat, I am just quickly checking, is really language of education. Communities have to feel that their children their children are also educated in their mother tongue, because mother tongue is important. It's an integral part of who we are. It's a cultural identity. I think with that also, it's critical for us to engage parents in the development. If there are no codified languages, etc., then we have to work on them. And the families, and particularly in the indigenous communities, they're contributing. They actually have this community asset, wealth of knowledge, and about language, about different forms of knowledge, whether it comes to ecology, environment, and etc., etc. I think I would say these things as well. I know that I'm taking a lot of time, sorry.
No, it's a very comprehensive. One of the big problems we have in the States and I imagine worldwide is absenteeism, that students have a school to go to but choose not to go to school, and or to skip certain classes, for example. And is this a problem for you? And if so, are there any incentives to promote, students to stay in the school and become as educated as the school can offer them, certainly literate and beyond? And Denise, would you like to comment on this?
Yeah, this is quite interesting, because I think it's not quite the same problem that we experience in South Africa, because um, I think kids are really eager to go to school. What they're not that eager about is the way they are being taught necessarily. The lessons, we have a very, very regulated uh, curriculum program, where I think in an attempt to try and level the playing fields and make sure that students across the country were all learning the same things at around the same time, and that no one got left behind. We have a curriculum that is quite regimented, where every week there's a set of things that teachers are supposed to have finished, and they do it in any way they can, not necessarily in the most interesting ways. So it doesn't necessarily result in absenteeism, but I would say it doesn't result in the students being fully present, if you know what I mean. I think an attempt to really engage students in learning in ways that empower them and make them feel ownership of their own learning and the ability to apply their own learning is probably a bigger issue. And also, if I may just almost tangentially say that a bigger issue is teacher absenteeism. I think we actually have a problem with teachers. And again, I don't necessarily mean that physically. Um, I mean being fully present for what it is that they are teaching and what it is learners need to learn. So I think the combination of being present cognitively in ways that are interesting, in ways that are really reaching children, in ways that are contextually relevant. And I bring in here what Richard mentioned about languages, and that Anna's also mentioned in the chat. Giving students access to something that they can relate to, because culturally, through their languages, they are able to identify with the substance of what is being taught in schools. So absenteeism in a far more abstract way is something that I think does need to be addressed in schooling. I think not only in South Africa.
Yeah, that is a very interesting answer. I hadn't even considered that when I formulated the question. Hakat, would you like to continue on this thought?
Yeah, I think, thank you so much. Denise actually made us to think beyond the simple understanding of absenteeism, physical absenteeism, to include the mental absenteeism. I'm not fully there, as she said. For me, I would go back to the physical absenteeism of students, among students and teachers as well. Although I don't work currently in this on the formal education policies and program discussion at the global level, in my doctoral thesis, which I got funding support from the MMEG community, was actually related to this issue as well. So because we saw what I documented in my doctoral thesis in Kyrgyzstan, in the rural communities, was related to the higher the level of the educational, I mean, young people who were in the lower secondary and high secondary were the ones who are often skip schools. Yeah, they were they were registered in the schools. They were supposed to be getting education, but they were not in the school physically. The same thing which Denise has highlighted is absenteeism was high among teachers as well. Now, all of this pointed out in my research in the past, since the collapse of the former Soviet Union, was related to the social status of education, because even the unemployment among very highly educated people was very low. Education was not necessarily bringing them an opportunity to enjoy which global at the global level many other citizens of other countries were actually enjoying. In the case of Kyrgyzstan, in the first 2 decades after the disintegration was really bad. So education was not really guaranteeing employment. And if you were employed, you were not getting higher income. So that was a very interesting thing. So social standards of education then declined. That increased the absenteeism among students of the lower secondary, high secondary as well. And another issue was related to the very low, what is it called? Low salaries of the teachers. And since then, very recently, there was a lot of programs on for teachers, and there is an increase in the salaries as well for the teachers, and there are specialized programs for teacher training as well. So in a way, student absenteeism is always related. It has the context why the students are not participating fully in the education process. Even if they stay in the States, some students are not, I mean, they do not, they skip schools, they do not participate fully. That means there are more issues that should be understood in the, what is the context? What are the factors that are impacting them to be away from the school as well? Another one, which I want to highlight one quick thing here is really, as Denise said, education has to be relevant, you know? I mean, when as individuals, when we see education not relevant, not good quality, I mean, it's better opportunity cost for me as an individual. Participating in the low quality, irrelevant education will be very high. So I'm spending 6 hours of my time in the school subject areas or disciplines when they are not relevant to me. When I think as an individual, I don't see its relevance now, maybe. And I think that kind of important questions we have to ask about. And in the current situation, with this rapid development of online learning, to be honest, some of the students are participating on self-directed learning. You know, there are more chances of them to be integrated easily or to get avail opportunities. Of course, it comes with the cost and whether it's time or you have to pay for the courses, etc. But there are also a plethora of learning materials and the courses online as well. So we need to think about education as it was defined in the past century versus currently. In the current century, I think education is such within the, what is that, 4 walls of the schools may not be very relevant. I mean, we need to discuss about it. I'm not suggesting that we have to close down all schools, because school education and educational institutions play beyond academic qualifications, etc. It also helps us to develop social skills and contributes to cohesion, social cohesion itself. I think we need to think about especially relevance of education in the current situation, in the current century as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Would I now like to open the chat to the question and answer period to our visitors, and we have had a very patient hand up from Adina, and then we have another question from Grace Makupa, and then we have another one from Alejandro. So I'll take the questions in that order. Adina, would you like to pose your question, please?
Thank you. I'd just like to say thank you to the guests who have come and done a fantastic job on explaining the education system, in particular in South Africa. I'm a selection committee member from the U.S.-Canada division, and my question is, and Denise, thank you for your PowerPoint presentation. I really appreciated that. My question is, how has the legacy of apartheid affected the educational system there?
I've made a note of that. Do you want, is that the question?
That is one of the questions I have.
Okay. Do you want me to answer now, Priscilla,
Yes.
or are you taking
Yes,
a few?
please. Yes, please
Okay.
answer. Yeah.
So thanks for that question, Adina. It has had ramifications that are really long lasting, and it is going to take generations, I think, to rectify with political will. The education system was hugely divided, as you know, where 15 to 20% of the schools were supported by the apartheid government, 4 times more in greater quality and quantity than schooling for Black children and Black communities. And the result is that these schools, even in 30 years, have not been able to catch up. And in fact, what has happened is that the divide has grown greater as a small middle class has managed to develop after 1994 and could then send their own children to the better resource schools. These were formerly whites-only schools. This particular population within the schools has done better. But the majority of schools, 80% of the schools, have remained in townships that have been segregated, separated politically and geographically. The conditions in these townships where 80% of the people live has not improved. The schools in those townships have not improved. In fact, have gotten worse with the exodus of those who are better off moving into better off schools, and therefore those schools then being less accountable to the middle class and better off, more educated parents. And so it's had this kind of perverse effect of bad schools getting worse, and good schools perhaps becoming more diversified, but still maintaining the particular culture that existed there before. So it's going to be an ongoing issue. I think geographical segregation, political geographical segregation remains stark in this country. It is where people live and it's where they go to schools. And so the legacy is going to be and is a long-lasting one. It's an ongoing struggle.
I'd like to read a comment from Anna that really kind of speaks to this, which is that the status quo, I can't read that. The status quo, we have a block here. The status quo remains the same for the economically disadvantaged children. And I think that this is, from her point from Botswana, this is very much tying into what you've said. Alejandro, would you care to pose your question? We'd like to hear from you.
Great. Thanks for the opportunity. Yes, I do have a question about government or governments in plural involvement. And if you happen to know the magic formula on how to make them think long term, because as you know, most governments around the world, they have their time, 4 years or 5, sometimes 6 years, and then they leave. So how can you implement or promote a strategy, a lifelong learning strategy, if they're all thinking short term? Because of course they want to be elected, right? And so they only can provide short term solutions. So for them to get elected, but then what happens? So that's probably a vicious circle sometimes where most education systems will not perhaps work or will not perhaps be implemented just because we're thinking about long-term investments, but governments only are able to provide short-term solutions. Thank you.
Rakat, would you like to address that question?
Thank you so much for this question. And I think I wouldn't have any magic bullet or very quick solution for that. I think, however, having said that, the governments, politicians who come into power still have to work with the technical staff of different ministries. You know, the technical staff members usually do not change. I mean, easily. Let me put it this way: they can change, but technical staff usually remains even though the governments change. At the same, in addition to that, we also have, for example, at the global level, through UNESCO and other educational development agencies, highlight the importance of developing 5-year education sector plans, and where the capacities of different technical staff members of the ministries, but also policymakers, are developed in educational planning and management, etc. Of course, the vision of the government, whoever comes into to power, is critical. But at the same time, these documents, these normative documents, some of the planning documents, are the ones which help the succeeding governments to take over or change and improve some of the educational priorities that they have. And I think I would really put faith in the community itself. This is why education has to be owned by us, by the community members, by parents, by the teachers and associations of many types, private sector, which has also a big interest in education because they need skilled labor too. So I think all of us are contributing, who have to contribute to the educational development of the countries. I think I would shortly answer like this. Yeah, sorry.
Thank you. Denise, would you care to add anything to that, or should we move on to another question?
No, just to really support the point that Regat is making about an active citizenry, because I think you know, Alejandro, you're quite right about how politicians kind of work for the immediate term of office and to win votes, but the active citizenry are there for the issues, and so I think active citizenry is probably the one thing that can hold governments accountable. And, you know, I think activism by that citizenry is really important in getting long-term solutions going.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Grace Akupa has a question in the chat. Grace, would you like to pose it in real time, or would you like me to read it from the chat?
Thank you, everyone. This is very interesting. I'm also in education. I have a quick question. You all mentioned about equity and inequity. When we talk about AI and technology, in itself, it's not allowing access for those students, especially in remote areas, to have access to internet, to have access to you know, the technology stuff. How can we ensure that we integrate this education too, so that we're not leaving anyone behind? Thank you.
Denise, would you like to talk to that?
I'm sorry, could you just repeat that? There was a crackle on the line on my side that I couldn't hear the question clearly. I'm so sorry for that. Or if you could repeat it, Priscilla.
I think, Grace, would you like to repeat the question, or would you like me to?
Yes, I was just more concerned about AI, which is evolving fast, and we are talking about equity in education. AI in itself is not equitable because in people that you're representing, rural people, they don't have computers, they don't have access to internet, they have load shedding. So how can we ensure that education is equitable by integrating these technologies, that we are not leaving any student behind?
Yeah, I think the only thing I can say in relation to that, it's, you know, besides AI, it's the all digital technologies. We've seen the inequities around that come to the fore really during COVID, where a large proportion of poor communities just didn't have access. So what to do? I think we use generally whatever technologies are available to us to get information and to try and access what we need to learn. The issue of access is an important one, but I think one uses whatever is available.
Yes.
What is a bigger issue for me is how does one critically evaluate that information? Because I think with AI, one also sees the possibility of getting a lot of information that needs to be critically sifted. We see with social media a lot of information coming to us that needs to be critically interrogated. So I think the building of critical skills to evaluate information and a range of skills to access information from wherever we can get it still needs to be part of the range of what we offer by way of educating people to learn and to find out new sources of information.
Thank you. Hakat, do you have a comment on AI and digital education?
Yes, I think a very good question in terms of the rapid development in the generative AI, its impact on education, society as well. I think education itself is an aspirational activity. No, we participate in education with some kind of goal for the future. It's not going to bring immediate impact. Benefits. We have to wait, unfortunately, and governments have to think also like this. No? At the same time, we have to deal with the present challenges of educational system as well. So the AI is developing very fast. The educational systems oftentimes are not keeping up with the technological development, and it's unfortunately, I must, because Denise, you won't probably disagree with me when I say education is one of the conservative sectors of the society too. They find it quite difficult to change rapidly, very quickly as well. So because we have standardized curriculum and et cetera, change in education system is not oftentimes easy. As well. Having said that, I think COVID-19 pandemic gave us an excellent opportunity for us to test out certain things because we were immediately expected to resolve some of the problems. Just simple lockdown, how do we reach out to children? How the teachers reach out to them. I think emphasis at that time was about a solution. And that solution came through improving teachers and educators' digital skills. There were several very ad hoc programs developed, or teacher-to-teacher support, community-to-teacher support, and communities jumping in and supporting the educational processes of the children and one another, and social-emotionally on the basics like literacy, numeracy, etc. But I think we saw a lot of the entire world became lab, to be honest, educational lab for us, and I think so digital skills of educators and training them in these technologies is important. As Denise said, we will not be able to keep up with the development of the technologies, and the training of educators oftentimes takes a lot of time and organizationally, and they also cost us a lot in terms of funding. So my highlight, here would be really increasing teachers' ownership of the process and increase their opportunities for professional development. This can be as simple as providing time for them to learn such things, so that teachers feel valued, they feel intellectual professionals, they feel like they can transform some of their practices within their classrooms and schools. And I think that kind of trust in educators should happen in relation to technologies as well. The second component I would like to highlight here is really digital, increasing the availability of quality digital content as well. In the COVID time, we've seen that digital content, particularly for the minority languages, was really scarce. So we need to contribute to the educational expansion of this quality educational digital courses and learning as much as possible. I mean, this can be very simple examples. I've seen a lot of examples during the COVID time where the community, diasporic communities, such as Kyrgyz people in Germany, for example, we got together in the evenings helping certain type of discussing about what's happening in education in the world, what kind of tools can be used, etc. Those kind of very simple examples, contributing as volunteers, but also as professionals. I actually also think the importance of revising or updating some of the curriculum standards. For example, digital skills are still to be integrated as an important competencies that education system has to develop. Up till now, we are still discussing what are the digital competencies we require through the educational system, no? That the educational systems have to develop. I mean, these are important questions. Policies have to be established or developed and improved. And work with the private sector is also important here, I would say. There are social, corporate social responsibility programs. Maybe those are the things which we have to kind of work together. For example, at our institute, with a very small team of the program, we have also developed literacy educators digital competency trainings, and we are kind of supporting several countries, 5 this year, in developing the digital training for the literacy educators, starting from the very basic tool which Denise has highlighted, how to use mobile phone. Yeah, we do have issue here, but at the same time we need to think about solutions, and solutions are there. I don't think yeah, sorry, yeah.
No, please continue. I'm sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, I think solutions are there. We just need to highlight these cases and learn from each other. And for example, we have this Global Alliance for Literacy, where we have 31 member countries interested in advancing literacy agenda at the national and the global level. But also we have associate members who contribute to the platform. And there we have this webinar series, technical webinars, where the countries and different providers come and share their experiences and cases and innovative approaches as well. And when it comes to rural young people and education, school education in the rural areas, I did my doctorate in this area of rural education. One thing is that mobile ownership among individuals across the world, of course, there are differences region-wise, gender, age, etc., but we can still see increase only. There is no drop. So there is an increase. There is also the price. I mean, the cost of the mobile data is going down too. You know, there are things which we can actually see as a positive development and see meaningfully, as Denise said, integrate into educational programs meaningfully. Not just technology is not going to solve all the problems. It's not a panacea, but we have to use meaningfully these technologies and relevant technologies for the type of education, type of the target group that we are actually using it for.
Thank you. That's very comprehensive. We have a question from Benita, who is on the board, and I see it in the chat, but I'm not sure if Benita would like to ask the question herself, or would she prefer to have me read it from the chat?
She had to leave.
Benita had to leave. Okay. Then I would like to ask the question. She asked Hakat if it's possible to identify a country that has made significant worth in literacy. Sorry.
Significant gains.
Significant gains in literacy in the last 10 years, and what contributes to their success. And Denise, she has a question also for Denise, but I'll start with this one with Hakat.
It will be very difficult to point out some countries because, first of all, I think it will be, again, going back to issue of how we define literacy. If we talk about literacy rate, which currently uses a proxy indicator, with the participation in the primary education, the ability to read and write a sentence, then of course a lot of countries can be commended for their excellent work of expanding formal education, particularly primary education. A lot of them, not all of them, of course, and I don't want to point out in one single case of a country. Yeah. And second of all, having said that, I also cited the statistics when it comes to actual abilities to read and write at the level which is expected by the curriculum standards. That is actually is a worrying issue. Children are going to school, but their reading proficiency level is also a question. You know, it's not improving as much at that level or sufficiently as we expect. So I think these kind of questions will have to be asked. And the good cases, there are countries which actually use more literacy campaign style programs. I think Denise cited one of the cases like Cuba, but there are many other countries also which uses literacy campaigns as an approach to improving literacy rates in the countries. Some other countries focus more on the local and diversified literacy programs, which are available everywhere. Other countries are going more in enriching literate environments where the literacy is actually seen in different spaces, libraries, community libraries, but also in the museums, in many other spaces. So I think in general, the literacy rate statistics is improving. However, it doesn't explain, it cannot tell us a lot in terms of actual ability and their capacities as well, because the assessment measurement tools are also being developed as we speak too, and being tested out. Yeah.
Thank you.
So,
Yes,
sorry, I didn't respond to your question with one single case. Yeah.
I think that's a very comprehensive answer, though. And Vanessa also had a question for Denise, which is, she says there are a plethora of NGOs focused on literacy in South Africa, yet there is no measurable impact on the PIRLS. What do you think, why do you think this is so?
Thanks. I tried to catch Vanita with an answer in the chat, but let me say it out loud as well. I think one of the reasons why nationally the impact is not felt and not seen, there isn't sufficient evidence nationally, is because these interventions, some of them are really excellent. They are focused. They include all the aspects that we know help to improve literacy levels. And literacy levels in real terms, in other words, where students, learners are able to read for meaning. So the problem is that these are done usually based on very limited sponsored programs in specific areas. So it might be in a region with a set of 10 schools, for example, and where those programs do get implemented, one does see interest, and all of those that I listed all showed very definite impact on literacy levels in those students who, those learners who embarked or were engaged in those programs. But it's not national. They, in fact, within our country of 9 provinces, there are probably 3 provinces which are paying dedicated attention to that, to this particular crisis. And even then, they are doing it in very limited ways. So they get a target set of schools where they know the involvement is going to be good, and which is going to maximize impact, but it doesn't cut across the board. And this is one of the reasons why it doesn't improve a national rate like the pearls would be assessing.
Thank you. We have a question from Maranisha here, who is with me.
Hello, ladies. Anna, Denise, Rakat. I think that I have a comment first and then a question. My comment is that I've sat here and listened to absolutely amazing presentations. I feel so proud that we have grantees who have such in-depth knowledge and skill and experience in the subject matter. And I wish that I hope that all the other people, grantees who have worked on education and others will be in touch with you so that you can share what you're doing, what you've done, and hope to improve some of the problems that have been identified, because I think I'm blown away by your presentations and how much you know and what you're doing. My question to you relates to something that Alejandro had raised and I've been thinking about, and it starts first of all with the comment that Denise had made in her presentation about how do we incentivize governments to make this a priority? At the end of the day, if governments aren't focusing on making education more accessible, what do we do about it? And I know, Rakat, you had talked about this global education meeting in Fortaleza. How do we reach those people to talk to them? We did have some colleagues from the World Bank. I don't know if they're still online, but how do we actually get to those governments? And Denise, you had said activism is what governments respond to. My concern is that activism will come from people who are hungry, people who want to fight violent crime, people who want to fight the most immediate concerns. They don't sit and think that the reason that we're hungry is because we haven't been educated. They have a more immediate. I think the best people to advocate for education are people like you who've worked in it, who know it, who have the ideas, and who have some of the solutions. So does it make sense for bodies of educators to become the activists? Because short of whoever was pulling the strings for these governments, who else is going to knock them on the head and say, do what Cuba did? Because that seems to me like, that was just an amazing response that they did, and look at the results they got. So this is open to whoever has an answer on this. Are there any solutions, and what do we do as MEG if we can be in any way involved in that move towards getting governments to focus on education? Thank you.
Just a quick response then too, because I am seeing that we're getting towards the end of our time, but absolutely, Miranisha. I mean, I think academics, people who work in NGOs, at what I call active citizenry, I think we all need to be activists. I mean, I think it doesn't take a large number of people who are focused on something to actually influence change. I think it's a relatively small number. It's that tipping point kind of figure, that percentage that gets sufficient thinking going. And having been active in educational struggles my whole life, I know that it takes a handful of people coming with really pressing, compelling ideas to get the 60% or 70% to sit in the middle and don't quite know which way to go, to influence them to say, this is something that's really important. This is something that we've got to work on. And I think it's why the SDGs ask people in academia, ask people who are in universities to do the research, to take up the issues. I mean, these goals are all interrelated. They are all interrelated. And I think as intellectuals, as people who are educated, and thanks to Meg, we've had the opportunities to study further and to further their own thinking and research and learning about these issues. I think it's incumbent upon us to be activists around these issues that benefit in the way that the SDGs are asking to happen by 2030 or towards 2030 anyway. So I just want to support what you're saying there. We've got to do it.
Thank you, Denise.
Thank you.
Rakat, do you have a comment on that?
Thank you so much. I think at the moment it doesn't come only from the inside the country. it also comes through global community as well. So I
Yes.
think it's very important for us to understand that the countries and governments do not exist in in isolation. So they are impacted by different kind of global factors as well. And one of it is putting and having education and literacy on the high agenda of the global discussions. I think such as global education meeting, which is going to happen next week in Fortaleza, and the government of Brazil also, or I mean, co-sponsoring this event, already shows that countries do pay attention to the issue of education. Not all of them, as you know, but it can work both advocacy by bringing them together again to highlight the importance of education, investment in education, through such events such as next week. On the other hand, also, I see the engagement and support provided by international organizations such as UNESCO, World Bank, should not be played. I mean, should be highlighted further. I think we do have the ability to it. By being as a part of UNESCO, I think it's also a privilege for me to contribute to these global discussions as well. And lastly, I want to say that one of the important group of citizens are parents. They're the best advocates. And I think parents associations and another group is very strong is the teachers associations. And I think not just the citizens who are not engaged in the education, but parents are the best in terms of bringing out the issues to and they're the voters as well. So I think we have to think about the opportunities differently and maybe use some of them. And the academics contribute to the national advocacy. Their research have to be in the languages of the countries. Oftentimes I see, including myself, we write in English in the dominant languages, international languages, not necessarily trickles down to the discussion at the national level. And I think this is why we need to contribute to the education research based, so the policymakers can also read, learn more from the research the academics are doing, researchers are doing in the countries. Yeah.
Thank you. We have a very few minutes left. I'm sorry I won't be able to get to the last questions. I tried to get to your questions earlier, and maybe you can do a follow-up with Denise and Hakat. I would really appreciate it if Denise and Hakat could put their contact information in the chat in case anybody here would like to ask a follow-up question and be in contact with you. I'd like to thank both of you extremely and thank Anna for her willingness to try to participate. It must be extremely frustrating, and I deeply sympathize with your situation. I guess the final word on this is, for me, is that community is essential in the promotion of education, whether it's promoting teachers, promoting students, promoting parents, promoting lifelong education. And I think even MMEG as a community can contribute to this. So again, I want to thank our participants very deeply and hope this conversation will continue in many forms among our participants here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Priscilla, for moderating, and thank you, all three of you, very much. It was a very informative discussion and lots of food for thought. Thank you very much. And thank you for your questions and your remarks. And yes, so I see you've shared your contacts Anna did so earlier, and so Denise and Rakat also. Thank you very much for that. And so please stay in touch. You can also follow Meg, of course, on all our social media platforms to see what's going on. There's another Meg Talk coming up shortly, and we'd invite you all to be there for that as well. So thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you for the invitation and for organizing this talk. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Very nice. Greetings, MMEG family of the World Group. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm so sorry I couldn't make it last Wednesday due to some technological glitches I encountered. Well, as you noted, I did note down a few comments on the chat, but let me just add a few more. And perhaps to start by saying our country, Botswana, is renowned for its impressive economic growth and commitment to development, but faces a crucial challenge in solidifying its educational foundation, which is literacy. While the country boasts of a strong track record of expanding access to primary education, ensuring that reading and writing skills are attained by all learners, this is a significant hurdle. In terms of academic performance, the gap between learners from mainstream groups and the ethnic minority communities seems to be widening year by year. And you'll realize that in Botswana, when you visit our schools, you visit public primary schools, whether they are in remote areas or in rural areas, the buildings are more or less the same, equipped with qualified teachers. The least qualification held by many teachers, by some teachers, it's a diploma in primary education. But in the last, I could say 10 years, government has ensured that the diploma holders are sent to the universities to study for a degree in primary education. School administrators, these are the school heads and their deputies, are also sent to acquire a diploma in education, a degree in educational management. So a lot is being done to improve the quality of teachers. But even so, we realize that the learners in ethnic minority communities in remote schools do not perform well academically because of several factors. And some of these factors include, I would say, the first thing is the use of one-size-fits-all teaching pedagogies or methods by teachers. Concepts taught not related to the experiences and cultures of learners from minority communities. I mean, this has been proven by research. You know, we have one curriculum, a standardized curriculum, all the syllabuses, and what is taught in one school, maybe in semester one, day one, then there would be a list of topics to be taught in all schools. Now, what teachers would do is to focus, maybe giving examples would focus on mainstream issues. This is the reason I'm saying the concepts taught are not related to the experiences and cultures of learners from minority communities. You would realize that, when teachers will teach maybe reading comprehension, or should I say even reading written composition, the topics would be things that would be about issues that are at times remote from the experiences of learners from those communities. Here we are talking about, the group we refer to as the Basara. Basara people are historically they were referred to as the Bushmen, but this has been found to be politically incorrect. So they are known as Basara. That's how we call them. We call them Basara people, not the Bushmen. So I always say to my students, you want them to write a composition and maybe you give them a topic, my first visit to town, or my first trip by train, or even my first flight to Europe. People who have not even seen an airplane, they have not seen a train, why don't you ask them to write about their ride on a donkey cart? That's what I would say. Why don't you ask them to write about how they keep water cool, whereas they do not have refrigerators? These are people who live in areas where they in mud huts, and they do not have these modern equipments. But there are ways in which in hot seasons they would keep their water cool. They would use ostrich egg shells. They know how to. They would clean them, keep the water there. There are ways. There's a process they follow to keep water in those eggshells, and dig holes and keep them under trees. There are ways in which they do this. So I would say, why don't you ask them to write about this? Why don't you ask them, you are teaching, say, adjectives. Why don't you ask them to describe how they work on when they make their beads, the beadwork, the wooden utensils, there's so much, the carpets that are made from animal skins. Why don't you ask them to write about these things? Or even when you give them reading comprehension, why don't you look for comprehension passages that are about things that learners are familiar with? Because, well, your duty is to teach them English, but if they draw concepts from things they are familiar with, they will be able to write, and yours would be to just correct the language, maybe the sentence construction and the like. So this is what we mean by, being culturally relevant when you teach them. Yeah. So the thing that has been the main hurdle has been that in the past, only the national language, Setswana, and English were included in the curriculum. But since this is it's still the pilot year, the beginning of this year, about 10 ethnic minority languages have been included at the early grades of primary school. It's still a pilot project that will be moved. Other schools it will be introduced in other schools as time goes on. But at least now, what I want to say is that some languages have been introduced so that learners can start learning in their mother tongue. We have mother tongue education, at least in the first 2 years, because research has proven that when students understand concepts in their mother tongue, as they move up the educational ladder, they can transfer that knowledge to other concepts, to the other things they learn. Yeah. So what else is the other problem is that some learners are not able to make it in school because we do not really diagnose their problems or the challenges they face. It is very crucial that learners could be assessed to find out if what their problem is, because currently there are students who would be in upper grades but not knowing how to read or write well. So there are different issues, like it could be health problems. Maybe there are learners that are they have dyslexia, or they have other, issues. We have special education teachers who are trained, and when each school has them as a special ed teacher or teachers, there are speech therapists. There could be issues to do with speech problems, sound recognition. There could be different health issues. And if left undiagnosed, the normal teacher would just say, this child cannot read. And if you are unable to diagnose the problem of the learner, it's very difficult to assist such a learner. So it's crucial that problems be diagnosed. There are other issues which we don't normally think about but are crucial. Are learners who come from homes where there are no reading materials. In those areas, there are people, there is no print available in their homes, no books, nothing. So if you are teaching a child and you don't know, because the issue is to make reading materials available to all learners and introduce a culture of reading. And some parents have not attained a higher level of education, and teachers would just assume that, oh, there's nothing such parents can pass on, there's no how they can assist their children, which is not true. If parents are coached on how to assist learners, there's something they can contribute. I'm not saying they can teach them how to read and learn, but there are things that they can teach them. Because the other problem is the teaching methods we use. Like the group I have referred to as the Basara. These are people who learn through storytelling. When they are at home, they learn through stories. They learn in groups. Basara are communal people. They do things as they work together as a community. And when they teach their children, say, how to hunt, they would be sitting, listening to a parent, teaching them, demonstrating to them how to perform certain tasks, even that basket weaving or making beads, or, how to recognize the footsteps of an animal or even a snake. They learn a lot. They are taught verbally by their parents, and us to imitate them. So it's very important for teachers to be empowered to use methods that can enable children to connect to what they know. So making connection to children's home literacy practices is very crucial in the education system. We need to empower our teachers, and we also have to assist our teachers to be empathetic to the learners, not to treat them the same way. You see, this one size fits all thing there's a need to revisit that. So the organization I have joined recently after retiring, the Botswana Dyslexia Support Services. does a lot of diagnosing learners' problems and assisting teachers. I just joined them, but the organization has been formed by an accountant after experiencing having, you know, how her brother suffered because it was not diagnosed that he's dyslexic. But then she got help. She took, because she's able to economically, she took her brother to a school, she says, in Cape Town, and he performed well because I understand dyslexic people are very intelligent if diagnosed and assisted accordingly. So now she has studied, she has taken lessons on identifying dyslexic learners with the British Association of Dyslexia, the Australian Association of Dyslexia. She attends lessons online. She attends conferences. She has taken this very seriously and has registered a non-profit organization. Well, we are still struggling with funds. There's more to tell you about that organization. I would ask you to help me identify those who can help us donate some funds for us to sustain this school, because currently we are just using a building that is rented from in one primary school, the Parents Teachers Association room, and there are some companies that have assisted with some funds to buy books, to help teachers. So let me not talk much about it, but I'll come back to you. So that's the only thing I wanted to share with you. Thank you very much once more for this opportunity. I'll surely visit when I'm in the US. Thank you. I'm Anna Mulusio. I even forgot to introduce myself. But since you're expecting a video from me, Anna Mulusio, I am an associate professor of language and literacy education. I've been with the University of Botswana, and hoping in January I'll be an adjunct professor there, continue with my research and helping the Dyslexia Support Services Botswana with teaching of literacy. Thank you.